Alaska rise.
I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
At this time, I'd like to engage with the distinguished chairman for a colloquy regarding the Polar Sea, the Coast Guard's second heavy icebreaker.
Does the gentleman yield time?
I yield back to you, Mr.
Okay.
Okay.
Yield to me? Okay. At this time, I'd like to yield my time to the gentleman for Alaska for the purpose of moving forward with the colloquy.
Mr. Chairman, again, thank you, and there may be some confusion here, but we've talked about this. I rise today in regards to the Coast Guard icebreaker Polar Sea. It has been decommissioned, will soon be put in dry dock to be prepared for scrapping. However, I believe that before a resale value of the Polar Sea is significantly reduced by removing its propeller and shafts, that the Coast Guard must consider other options. To date, the Coast Guard has not officially surveyed the private sector for interest in the Polar Sea in its current condition. Private sector interest in the Polar Sea may increase after this summer's Arctic drilling season, when permitted drilling is expected to be shortened due to heavy ice in the far north. My good friend from Washington, Mr. Dix, and I are offering this colloquy to delay the scrapping. Our goal is to specifically instruct the Coast Guard to provide a survey of whether or not there's a better use for this vessel. I was prepared to offer an amendment today that would direct the Coast Guard to report back to Congress on the condition of the Polar Sea, the costs associated with reactivating the vessel for service, and the interest of private or public entities in purchasing and operating the Polar Sea. This amendment would have prevented the Coast Guard from removing any major equipment or systems from the Polar Sea until the Coast Guard submitted its report to Congress. Unfortunately, the amendment is subject to a point of order, but I'd ask the chairman for his support and commitment to work with me and Mr. Dix on this important issue as we pursue the alternative legislative fix in the Transportation Committee. Time is an essence. I'd like to now yield to my good friend from Washington, Mr. Dix.
I thank my good friend from Alaska for yielding, and I thank the gentleman for raising this important issue. The dramatic reduction in the Arctic sea ice that is happening at the North Pole is leading to substantial growth in activity in the Arctic region. The Coast Guard in the high latitude study determined that it needs a minimum of 3 heavy and 3 medium icebreakers to meet its statutory mission. This bill includes funding to start the design phase of a new heavy icebreaker. However, it will not enter service until 2020 at the earliest. Until then, there will be only 1 heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star, and 1 medium icebreaker in operation. This is clearly not enough for the Coast Guard to accomplish its mission, and given the age of the Polar Star, which entered service in the 1970s, the possibility of a breakdown or extended maintenance period is significant, which would leave us without any serviceable heavy icebreaker at all. As my friend has noted, the Polar Sea, the Coast Guard's second heavy icebreaker, has been decommissioned and is awaiting the final orders to scrap it. Given our rapidly growing need in the polar region, I worry that the Coast Guard is not considering other options for the Polar Sea. Personally, I think a compelling case can be made for directing the Coast Guard to make the investment and put it back into service. But at the very least, the Coast Guard needs to take time to review alternatives. In my judgment, it would be a shame to scrap such a potentially useful asset when there is so much evidence before us that we need more immediate ice-breaking capacity. My friend from Alaska has noted that he and I had been considering working on language that would direct the Coast Guard to consider alternatives, but that such an amendment would be subject to a point of order. I'm glad the gentleman will be able to work on the issue on a bill pending before the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I want to indicate to him that I share his commitment to ensuring that the nation's ice-breaking needs are met, and will continue to work with him to ensure that the Coast Guard considers all available options for the Polar Sea. I yield back to the gentleman from Alaska. I yield back to the chairman, Mr. Adderholt.
No, he yields to me, and I yield to him.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I understand the concerns of my colleagues from the state of Washington and from the state of Alaska, and I appreciate them calling this attention to the subcommittee. It is important to keep the vessel intact. The subcommittee agrees with this important goal, and I would urge the Coast Guard to work with the authorizing committee to accomplish assessment.
I thank for the understanding of the chairman and the ranking member of the full committee. This is important to our nation, especially Alaska, and I do appreciate your consideration. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.